There are bad WWE storylines, there are horrible WWE storylines. And then, there's the Mae Young hand. Yes, a hand. Now you hear that for the first time and you think, wait, no way, that's a joke, right? But no, this actually happened on live TV. Here's the setup. Mae Young, a legendary women's wrestler from the Golden Age, already in her late 70s at the time, gets involved in a bizarre romantic storyline with Mark Henry, who at that point was being pushed as the sexual chocolate. His gimmick was basically that he was addicted to love, lust, and everything in between. It was silly, but it was entertaining in that late 90s and 2000s, Attitude Era, kind of way. But then came the shocker, out of nowhere. WWE paired him with Mae Young. Mark Henry was in bed with a woman old enough to be his grandmother. It wasn't just surprising, it was jarring, but then Vince McMahon and his creative team decided to crank it up from ridiculous to nightmare fuel. They had Mae Young announce that she was pregnant with Mark Henry's child.
I'm pregnant! What?
The crowd laughed. People thought, okay, this is going to be some quick comedy gag, right? It'll be over in a week, but no, WWE kept it going. They built it up. They hyped it. They teased the birth like it was WrestleMania itself. And when the payoff finally came, when the world sat down to see what this insane storyline would lead to, Mae Young screamed, yelled, and squirmed, and gave birth to, not a baby, not a punchline, not even a doll. No. She gave birth to a human hand, a freaking hand. That was it. That was the grand reveal. A single, slimy, prosthetic hand plopped on the screen. That's what weeks of build-up led to. That's what millions of wrestling fans tuned in for. And the worst part? Nobody explained it. There was no follow-up, no storyline continuation, no logic, just a hand. And then WWE moved on like nothing happened, and to make matters even more absurd, years later, WWE brought it back as a joke.
Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Mae Young's son.
No.
During a backstage skit, a grown man in a giant hand costume showed up, claiming to be Mae Young's fully grown child, and the sad thing? That was actually the best part of the whole storyline, because at least it leaned into the insanity and gave people a laugh. But here's the truth. When wrestling fans argue about the worst WWE storylines of all time, Mae Young giving birth to a hand isn't just on the list, it's usually number one. Because it wasn't just bad, it was surreal, it was insulting. It was wrestling at its absolute dumbest. So whenever you think WWE can't possibly sink lower, whenever you watch some cringe storyline and wonder, how did this make it to TV? Just remember, somewhere out there, there's still a hand. And it all started with Mae Young. Let me tell you about another one of the strangest, most painful examples of WWE creative falling flat on its face. A storyline so bad, so anticlimactic, that it turned a monster of a wrestler into a walking punchline. I'm talking about Eric Rowan and his infamous cage. Or worse, the cake. Now, here's the thing. When this storyline started, it actually had potential. Rowan was fresh off the Wyatt family. He had the look. He had the size. He had the presence. WWE wanted to make him mysterious again, dangerous, unpredictable. So they gave him this weird little pet cage covered in cloth that he carried to the ring week after week. And fans? Fans were intrigued. Everyone wanted to know what was inside that cage. Was it an animal? Was it some creepy new gimmick? Was it something that tied back to Bray Wyatt? The internet was buzzing. For once, people were talking about Eric Rowan. But then, WWE did what they always do when they don't have a real plan. They dragged it out. Week after week, Rowan would peek inside the cage. Opponents would scream in horror after looking at it. Commentators would sell it like it was the most terrifying thing in the world. And the mystery kept growing. Until finally, after months of build-up, WWE revealed the big secret. And what was in the cage? A giant, fake-looking spider. That's right. After all that suspense, after all the hype, Rowan pulled the cloth off to reveal the fakest rubber spider you've ever seen in your life. It didn't even move. It just sat there in the middle of the cage, like something you'd buy at Spirit Halloween for $10. And just like that, the storyline died. Instantly. The crowd groaned. Social media exploded with laughter. Eric Rowan went from mysterious monster to the guy with the dollar store spider. His credibility? Gone. His push? Dead on arrival. And here's the cruel part. This wasn't just a bad storyline. It ended up being Rowan's last storyline. Just a few months later, in April 2020, WWE released him. After years of ups and downs, after finally giving him TV time again, his big farewell was carrying around a plastic spider and destroying a cake. That was it. That was how WWE closed the book on Eric Rowan. And that's why this storyline makes the list of WWE's worst. Because it wasn't just bad. It was a waste. It was WWE taking a guy with momentum, dangling a mystery in front of fans, and then killing his career with a cheap prop. Number 1. There are bad storylines in wrestling, and then there's Katie Vic.
Let me ask you a question, Kane. How happy is Katie Vic?
A moment so infamous, so absurd, that it didn't just insult fans, it shattered the very foundation of Kane's character. Let's rewind. Kane's story wasn't supposed to be comedy or trash TV. It was mythology. The tragic half-brother of The Undertaker. The child left to burn in a fire. The boy locked away in shadows while Undertaker grew up never knowing he was still alive. And when Kane finally emerged, masked and scarred, it felt biblical. A walking ghost of family trauma. So how on earth did WWE go from that to Katie Vic? Because in 2002, WWE decided Kane wasn't just a monster. No, apparently, he was also a drunk driver. Triple H, in a promo war, suddenly dropped a bomb. Kane had killed a woman named Katie Vic in a car accident years before. And not only did Kane kill her, but then came that segment. Triple H, in a Kane mask, crawling into a funeral home coffin, pretending to, well, he did some terrible things, you know. Necrophilia. He moaned and did disgusting things on live TV. And here's the problem. How can a man who wasn't even alive in WWE's own mythology be accused of killing a girlfriend? Kane was supposed to be locked away, deformed, burned, half dead, living like a phantom until Paul Bearer unleashed him. So who was this regular guy Kane that WWE suddenly wanted us to believe was out dating in college, driving cars, and crashing into girlfriends? It doesn't make sense. It can't make sense. Because the Katie Vic story wasn't written to make Kane deeper. It was written as cheap shock TV. And it took one of wrestling's most tragic, layered characters, and made him into a joke. Fans didn't boo the villain. They booed the storyline itself. It was universally hated. Even wrestlers backstage were embarrassed. And to this day, when you mention worst WWE storyline, Katie Vic is always at the top of the list. Because this wasn't just a bad segment. It was a character assassination. They had built Kane as a monster forged in fire, and reduced him to a clown in a coffin skit. Katie Vic didn't just fail. It mocked the intelligence of every single fan watching. And that's why it will forever be remembered as the moment WWE burned its own mythology. Worse than the fire that scarred Kane in the first place. So when you think WWE can't possibly come up with anything worse, when you think you've seen the bottom of the barrel, remember Katie Vic. Remember how a character built on tragedy, fire, and myth was dragged into one of the most tasteless, embarrassing segments in wrestling history. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.